I have been excited about teaching about this subject for a long, long time. I have never in my career, 31 years, covered this subject. And I only became aware of it as a real issue a short time ago in terms of, oh my goodness, there's a lot the Bible says to say about this. I need to cover it. So I'm going to start with this. Do you remember this State Farm commercial that was on 2012? So it's been a while. So this woman comes out and she sees this guy taking a picture of his damaged car with his phone, and he's going to send it into a State Farm insurance company, and it's just an app on his phone. And she's like, well, I didn't think State Farm had that because I read it online. And she said, everything you read online is true. And then she said, oh, and he said, well, what are you doing here? She said, I'm waiting for my boyfriend. He's a French model. And then that guy in the green shirt pulls up or walks up and says, bonjour. He's not French, he's not a model, but she heard it online, so it's got to be true. And obviously, there's a big chuckle. It's like, ha, 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 funny, funny. But the reality is, we fall for stuff all the time online. All the time. How many of you remember, and sometimes the things we fall for, they're not too serious. How many of you remember the great banana scare of 2000? Remember this? January 2000, there was a rumor that was started that you must not, an email started circulating, and it said, do not eat imported bananas. Do not eat them, because you will get necrotizing fasciitis. You know what that is? It's this thing that eats you up. It devours you. So if you eat a banana, it could start eating you. This disease. It's like, oh, and so people were terrified. So so many calls started coming to the CDC that they actually issued a statement saying it's not true. You will not be consumed by bananas if you eat a banana. Instead of helping, that poured gas on the fire. The CDC got so overwhelmed, they actually had to start a banana hotline for people calling in terrified that they were about to be devoured by the bananas they were eating. I'm not making this up. And you know I'm not. You know what we're like as a nation. I mean, we're just absolutely crazy with this stuff. We all survived the amazing banana apocalypse of the year 2000 because it wasn't even real. And so there are things like that are just kind of funny. We hear them and laugh. And it's like, oh, gullible people. But then there are stories that we hear that are not so funny. This one's going on right now. How many of you heard about this one? There's a trial going on of this man, Alex Jones. He is he has his own radio program. I don't know how many followers he has or listeners, but after the horrible, horrible, horrible Sandy Hook shooting at the elementary school, he went online, told all his followers it was all staged. No children were killed. This is all a ploy to get your guns taken away. These were all actors. And he told the story over and over again. He named names, including the parents in the middle there. He called them out by name on his radio program, said they're actors. Their child isn't actually dead. And the followers went after these people. They went after the parents. So they're grieving the loss of their dead child, and all of a sudden they're receiving death threats. They're being harassed constantly. I mean, the stories that came out of this are so heartbreaking. I can't even imagine the pain of bearing a child and dealing with death threats at the same time. And so finally, the parents got together and they filed suit against him in a defamation suit, and they're winning in every state that they win, and he's filed a bankruptcy. But I mean, can you imagine the horrific pain of trying to describe what it's like to live through that? You've lost your child, and now you've got to defend that actually happened, because all these people don't believe it, because this one guy goes on the radio and says, no, it was all made up. And they believed it. I can't even imagine what it's like for these poor parents to live through this. So here's why we're doing this message today. One of the fastest vanishing qualities in American life today is discernment. Discernment. We are losing it as a nation. Discernment is this. It's the ability to think critically about content, like asking that question, is this even accurate? It's the ability to distinguish truth from fiction. Bananas will not eat you. You're not going to die from eating a banana. And we don't even know that. It's the ability to weigh an argument and then decide correctly. That's discernment. It is an important biblical truth. I'll show you the verse that really triggered my thoughts on this in just a minute. But we need discernment now more than ever because people are really getting hurt. And people are believing lies and things that are not true, and they're acting on it. And people are really being hurt today. We've got to really think critically about this subject. So we're in this series called Reset, and this is one of the things I wish we had a reset button on as a nation. It's like we need to reset our thinking around the topic of discernment. We're going to talk about how do you develop it, because the Bible actually has a lot to say about it. So I want to ask you to open up your program, grab your notes from inside, and take a pen. There are going to be some things you're going to want to write down. And welcome, of course, to those of you who are watching online. So glad you have decided to tune in today. If you're watching on YouTube and you want our notes, go to our website at penuelchurchlife.com. And you can have our notes downloaded for free. So let's jump right into this. The first thing that we have to all agree on, this shouldn't be hard, right? This should be simple. We should all agree on this. You have to acknowledge that there are people trying to deceive you. In this world, you have to acknowledge this. There are people trying to deceive you. Discernment will not happen until you acknowledge the truth of that sentence. There are people who want to deceive you. And for all kinds of reasons. How many of you remember this story from 2019? Remember Jussie Smollett? So he was an actor, and he was in Chicago. He came out of a Subway, got his sandwich, and all of a sudden he said two white guys wearing Make America Great hats grabbed him, beat him up, threw bleach on him, and then put a noose around his neck. And oh my goodness, the media attention went crazy. It's like, are you kidding? A modern day lynching? Right in Chicago? Was just huge news. Until it was discovered that he hired those two men on the left to stage the whole thing. They weren't even white. He hired them to wear the hats and attack him, and it was discovered fairly easy, and he had to admit it and go to jail for a little while. If you cannot acknowledge this, you are in big trouble, that there are people in this world who want to deceive you. There are people in this world who have their own agendas, and they are out to make you believe those agendas, and they're not true. You have to be able to say that. There are liars in this world. Now, this was a big revelation for me. I believed up until not that many years ago, my wife actually helped me make this change in my mind. I used to believe that the right attitude in life was just trust everyone until they prove themselves not trustworthy. And that's how I lived my life. And it had carnage all throughout my life. Trust everyone until they prove themselves not trustworthy is a bad model to live by. It was my wife who chased me into the understanding. It's like, you got it wrong. Trust is earned. Trust is earned. Don't just give trust out. Trust should always be earned. And by the way, people of character have no problem earning your trust. None. Because they got nothing to hide. They got no agenda. And if you say, you know what, obviously we're new and I don't know if we're still building a trusting relationship, you say that to a healthy person, they're going to be like, yeah, that's fine. Because they got nothing to hide. You know who doesn't like it when you say that? Con artists, liars. They don't like it when you don't just trust them. So you have to get to the point where you accept this. So let me show you the verse that I was reading that made me go, oh my goodness, I got to teach on this. Because this is so true. It's been true for thousands of years. Proverbs says, people may cover their hatred with pleasant words, but they're deceiving you. They pretend to be kind, but don't believe them. So two really important things here that struck me when I was reading this verse. I'm like, I have to teach on this. First off, they are deceiving you. For thousands of years, there have been people in this world who want to do one thing to you, deceive you, for their own agenda. And there are lots of different competing agendas out there, right? Jussie Smollett wanted his moment of fame, right? That Alex Jones guy, he had his own agenda. So the people that are deceiving you have an agenda. And so what does the Bible command? Don't believe them. Did you know that the Bible actually tells you don't believe people? Trust is earned. It's okay to say, I don't believe you. Let's work on this and see. So a couple of things that I think now, when I think about this subject, stop trusting what everyone says. This is really important. Because there are people out there in the world who are trying to deceive you, the Bible says, don't believe them. Stop trusting what everyone says. The second thing related right to it is stop believing what you see on the internet. Now, I originally wrote read, but now I have to write see, and I'll explain why in a minute. And this is really, really timely in light of the political season that we're in. So if you watch any live TV right now, you are bombarded with commercials, right? Over and over again. And a huge percentage of the things that we see in our commercials and things we see online are lies. They are not true. It was funny, when I was prepping my message this week, I was doing a lot of research into this, and there was a video of this Democrat introducing Trump and saying all these wonderful things in this amazing video, and it was all a lie. We act like people don't have video editing software in America today. It's like, wow, really? We can edit videos and pictures and they're not real? Yeah, it was brilliantly done. And of course it was, when they found out who did it, it was a satire company. A guy who makes a living making fun of other people. And so he just wanted this to roll, and of course it did. But of course the outcome was people were mad at this person for talking. It's like, it's not even true. And we don't know that. But a huge percentage of what's going on right now in our political season isn't even true. I went hunting for this video, and I can't find it, so I apologize. I'm going to tell you this from memory. Right at the start of COVID, so that's how long ago it was, I was watching something, and it was either on Amazon Prime or Netflix. I mean, doggone, there's too many things. So I can't find it. But it was a documentary, and they were talking about how the political parties, both parties, and they showed it really balanced, which I appreciated. Both parties hire people whose only job is to make up lies about the other candidates. It was an incredible video to watch. I mean, the one guy, the first guy, he wasn't making a lot of money. He was very honest about what he was getting paid and what he was doing, but his job was to go on social media, all the different forms of social media, and make up lies about his political opponent in the other party. And he talked about how hard it is because, you can't lie too much. The lie has to be believable. And they literally get paid to lie about the opposing parties. And both parties pay people to do this. It was an incredible documentary, and welcome to America. This is what's happening. So if you just believe what you hear based on what you believe for your politics, you are guaranteed to be believing some things that are not true. Who wants to run for office, by the way? Who wants this? It's like literally the other side, no matter what your political views are, is going to be lying about you. The Bible says they are a nation without sense. There is no discernment in them. I laugh when I read it because I think, well, this was written for us, right? This is America. But it wasn't. It was actually a long, long time ago when that verse was written. But when you lose discernment, you lose common sense. Okay? Isn't that funny? We literally are a nation that panic and have to have a CDC banana hotline because we've lost all common sense, because we've lost the ability to discern. And it's not getting better, in my opinion. I think it's getting worse. So, and the other big thing that trusting people do all the time is they ignore red flags. So if you really want to really go in the right direction here toward discernment, you got to stop ignoring red flags. If you're too trusting, you know exactly what that sentence is like because you've ignored red flags in relationships and you've paid prices for this. I was reading the story about this woman. Her name is Andy Dorfman. She was on the show called The Bachelorette, and she got engaged to that guy, Josh. It didn't last. And when she broke up, she wrote about it, and I saw this article a long time ago, and I clipped it because I thought, this is what we're talking about. Ready? She said there were a lot of red flags that I just didn't see. Actually, it wasn't that she didn't see them, she ignored them. Most of the time, it's not that you don't see them, it's that you ignore them. She said, once I was able to see those flags, I was disgusted with myself for what I put up with. I was a strong, independent woman, and I allowed him to be emotionally abusive. Now, I don't want someone jealous, and I don't want someone controlling. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? Too trusting. Too trusting. Trust is earned. Was that Bible say, that verse again from Proverbs? People are trying to lie. They cover up their intent. They're trying to deceive you. Don't believe them. Trust is earned. So how easy is it for you to acknowledge that there are liars and deceivers in this world? Okay? Are you too trusting? Discernment begins with a healthy skepticism. So then, okay, great. So I'm skeptical. Now what do I do? Well, the second thing you have to learn to do is one that's so much fun to talk about, and learn to think gray. This is such an interesting thing to talk about. You gotta learn how to think gray in this world. Since we have a world like this, we're not changing that, right? I'm not going to wave a magic wand and all the liars go away. They're only going to get better at editing pictures and videos, right? They're not going to get worse. They're going to get better at it. So more and more stuff is going to come out that's going to trick us. So you have to learn how to think gray. And a great example is just given to our nation recently. How many of you know who those two are? Right? They were all over the news recently. So Johnny Depp and his ex, Amber Heard. So, wow. Okay, I didn't watch any of the trial. So for those of you who don't know what was happening here, they were married, they ended the marriage, and she came out and said that he was an abusive man and a physically, verbally, sexually abusive man. I don't remember all the things, but he lost a contract with Disney to do a movie. I mean, he started really suffering in his career, and he's like, this isn't fair that everybody just believes it. I mean, isn't it crazy? We live in a world now where you are guilty until proven innocent. Poor guy was being judged and executed in the court of public opinion in our ridiculous cancel culture, which I absolutely hate. And he's like, I need the right to defend myself. So he filed a defamation suit against her. And he won $15 million. And I had people in my life who watched the trial. Apparently it was online. I didn't watch any of it. It was on TV. Oh my goodness. I looked up just a little bit about it. Neither of them came out smelling like a rose. But what she was saying about him wasn't provable. It wasn't true. And yet still you have people that defend him, and still you have people that defend her. Here's the reality is, how many of you actually know what happened in their marriage? Raise your hand. Right, ridiculous, right? This is a perfect situation where we need to just think gray. So here's what thinking gray means. Not forming an opinion about an important matter until you've heard all the relevant facts and arguments, or until circumstances force you to form an opinion without access to all the facts. So for instance, if you were being hired to be Johnny Depp's attorney, you would need some facts, right? Before you form your opinion about whether you're going to take the case. Or if you were a jury member sitting in the jury trying to decide the case, you can't think gray. How many of you are a potential attorney for Johnny Depp or a jury member for the trial, right? Everybody else, we need to learn how to think gray. And it comes from this amazing book. If you like to read this book, The Contrarian's Guide to Leadership, that's where I got the phrase. And he says in the book that what we tend to do is we're black and white thinkers, right? We hear something, we immediately make a decision. It's got to be true. Johnny Depp is an awful, evil man. Cancel him. Or Amber Heard is an awful, evil woman. Cancel her. And we just jump to conclusions all the time. And instead, we need to hit the pause button when we hear stories like this. Here's the thing you have to realize. You don't have to make a decision about Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. No decision needed. You don't have to have an opinion about it. Because they're not about to knock on your door and ask to be your friend, right? We don't have to have an opinion about all these things, and yet we do. You want to see how clear this is in the Bible? Look what the Bible says. Don't jump to conclusions. There may be a perfectly good explanation for what you just saw or heard or read online. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't make a conclusion. You don't need to have an opinion about it. The Bible goes on to say this: the first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. Isn't that true? Have you ever been in a courtroom or watched anything online? Or watched courtroom TV? It's like, oh my goodness, they're guilty, guilty, guilty. And then they're cross-examined and they're like, oh, they're innocent. And you can go back and forth. So that's exactly why that verse says, don't jump to conclusions. You don't know. Don't pretend like you do know. You don't know. Think gray about it. Hit pause, go, wise people, according to the Bible, don't rush to make judgments about what they're hearing or what they're seeing online. They don't rush to make judgments about that. They wait to form their opinions. Don't jump to conclusions. So let me give you an example of this. Let's move this from theory into actuality. Let's say that this next week, you get a phone call. And it's from someone in the church, and they're like, hey, I just got to tell you. Did you hear about Pastor Brian? Did you hear about Pastor Brian? He got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Yeah, they got a cookie jar in the kitchen. It's got like chocolate chip cookies. They warned him 57 times not to put his hand in the cookie jar. They caught him again. They got cameras up, and they caught him. Yeah, he's in so much trouble. I mean, he is in so much trouble. I mean, they put him on discipline, one more cookie. He's gone, right? One more cookie, it's gone. But don't tell anyone I told you. But I know this is true because my sister's brother's nephew's Uncle Fred, who was in the Walmart 3 aisles away, heard this whole thing being discussed. So I know it's true. Okay, so, all right. So what do? Think gray. It may be true. It may not be true. And you hold it right in the middle. You don't form a conclusion about what you know that they know, because they always say it definitively, don't they? They know this is true. No. Hold it in the middle. Don't make a decision. Think gray. So what are you doing while you think gray? Okay. So here's how this flows. I acknowledge that there are liars in this world. Anyone want to deny that? Oh no, everyone tells the truth. There are liars in this world. So because of that, we need to develop discernment. That means when we hear something, we think gray about it. It may be true, it may not be. Johnny Depp may be this way, he may not be. Brian may be stealing chocolate chip cookies, he may not be. I don't know. Okay? So then what do? Well, then you do your research. You got to look into this. And it's just so important because there is not a day that goes by that somebody isn't circulating something that they know is true. They just know this is true. And here's some new ones that I just found when I was looking this up last week. Cell phones emit more radiation with charging. Oh no, all of you, never charge your phone again. Wait, what? My phone will be dead. I don't have a landline anymore. Okay. How many of you heard this? 4 artificial intelligent robots just killed 29 scientists in Japan. Oh my goodness. Oh my, isn't that terrifying? Arnold was right. Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator, he was right. Here they come. They're coming just like the movies. Oh my goodness, this is terrifying. Oh boy. There's a man who's charged $70,000 after exploiting a DoorDash glitch. And I know that's true because I watched the video, because that one had a video. And I watched the video and it said $70,000 and it was DoorDash. So I know this is true. I'm not kidding, it actually had a video. But it's not true. None of these things are true, but people are scared and believing and forwarding on and on. Here's the reality of the world that we are. We don't just have liars in this world. We also, like I said, we have comedians who are constantly doing this because they are laughing like crazy all the way to the bank. Because if they can get you to watch their video and pass it on, then all of a sudden when it all comes out, everybody goes to their website and they make a lot of money. So don't misrepresent, or don't misunderstand that there is a motive for their humor and their attempt to try and deceive you. And how can we ever underplay the importance of high school boys? Because I'm telling you right now, if I was living in this world as a high school boy, you don't think my buddies and I would be trying to get everyone to believe all the crazy things that we would be dying in study hall, making up stuff that we would be sending out just to see how far we could get it. And all apparently you have to do is go to a place called Reddit and post anonymously anything and people will believe it. Oh my goodness, we would be having fun. So that's the world that we live in. That's what's happening. And so we need to be able to slow down. So here's what the Bible says. When Paul started going out, and Paul was one of the early followers of Jesus, he started going all around the Mediterranean Sea, telling everybody he could about Jesus. And he came to a community called Berea. And it says the people of Berea were more open-minded than those in Thessalonica, and they listened eagerly to Paul's message. But they searched the scriptures day after day to see if Paul and Silas were teaching the truth. So they didn't just believe what Paul said. They held it in the middle. Is it true or not true? It may be true or not true. So we're going to do our research and find out. Now, they were studying the Old Testament because Paul had gone to the Jewish community to say that Jesus is the Messiah and he has fulfilled the Old Testament law. And so they just looked it up. And when they discovered that it was true, then they believed it. They didn't just believe what they were told. They did the research. So how in the world, in a world like ours, do we do any kind of research? A couple of things. First, obviously, whenever you can, investigate the content of what you're being told. Bananas are killing us all. Okay, well, go to the CDC website. What do they say? Yeah, bananas aren't killing us. Okay. So don't just believe it. Investigate the content whenever you can. How many of you have ever in your entire life heard that this candy is dangerous? You ever heard that? How many of you have ever heard that a kid died from eating Pop Rocks? I heard this when I was young. Back in the 70s when these things came out, they were awesome. They were incredible. I loved them. Pop them in your mouth. They pop. It was so exciting. And then all of a sudden they started disappearing from stores. You know why? Because this guy, remember Mikey from the old Life cereal commercials? Mikey ate 6 of them, 6 packs of them, and then drank 6 Pepsis. It's like, who does that? But apparently Mikey did. And his stomach exploded. And so it got so bad. And this was pre-internet days. This is how crazy our world has always been, but it's worse now. So crazy that the company sent 600 letters to principals all around the country trying to say, it isn't true. And they couldn't talk anyone out of it. The sales plummeted, and they actually pulled the product until years later another company took it and rebranded it and launched it again. Matter of fact, Mikey was coming home from school one day when the phone rang, and his mom took the call, and there was a friend crying on the other end. I'm so sorry, I just heard about Mikey. He died. And she's like, he just walked in from school. It's like, this is the world. Don't just believe it. Think gray and then do your research. She could have called and said, is your son okay? Right? Don't believe it. Do a little research because the world is going to lie to you. So how do you do research on all of these rumors? So the first site, flip your notes over in the back, Snopes.com. Now, Snopes.com has a little bit of bias politically, so don't go there for political information, but go there for Pop Rocks. And how many of you heard about Wayfair? What a horrible thing. Well, this great company, all of a sudden, this horrible rumor gets spread that if you buy certain products, they're in the sex slave industry and they'll send you a child. I'm not kidding. And I knew people who believed it. It's like, no, you're not buying a child when you buy something from Wayfair. And these companies, they take this very seriously. Pop Rocks had to stop making it. They get damaged by this kind of garbage all the time. So if you want to know about cultural things like that, go to Snopes. If you want to know about political stuff, the 2 places I'd recommend, I only have the first one on there, factcheck.org. So that one seems to be really balanced in fact-checking both Democrats and Republicans, which I wanted to give you. I didn't want to give you one that leans one way or the other. So I did my best research to try and find one that's a little more balanced. And then I found this other one yesterday morning. It was too late to change the notes. MediaBiasFactCheck.com, which is really interesting. They will tell you if the sources that you're using lean left or lean right, and in a fascinating way. They don't just look for factual accuracy. They also look for bias in the way the articles are written, because you can add power to your words designed to move people by the word choices you make, and they evaluate that too. Fantastic. Fantastic. That way you can at least have an idea of what influence, how you're being influenced, so you can make your choice. All right, so the other thing that I wish we had the ability to really do is investigate the person. This is super hard in our world. But here's something that has bothered me for a long, long time. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but isn't it true that the world has always had crazy people? That's not I don't mean to be disrespectful to crazy people, but the world has always had crazy people, right? Always. Does our world have crazy people? Right. So it used to be easy to spot the crazy people, right? They stood on the street corner wearing their underwear on their head and their pants backwards, and they held up signs, they shouted crazy things to all of us, and we walked by and we're like, oh, you're crazy. And we didn't believe anything they said. The internet has changed all of that. They're crazy and anonymous, and you don't get to know them, and you don't get to see them. And they're still spewing all of this stuff that all these people are believing, but if you met them and tried to spend 5 minutes with them, you'd walk out and say, they're crazy. And the anonymity of the internet has changed everything. And now all of a sudden, these people that in real life have no friends, have no influence, have a tremendous amount of influence because people are believing them. So when you can, there's a great passage in Matthew where Jesus said, watch out, because there are people who come dressed as in sheep's clothing, but they're actually wolves. And he said, one of the things to watch is look at their life and the fruit of their life, because you can't hide that. And their actions will reveal what they actually are. So whenever you can, try and find out the source of it, because oftentimes you're going to find out, and it's like, yeah, I'm not believing that person. Now, all of this, so important in our world today, but the reality is, part of why I wanted to talk about today is because I got burned on it once. And once that I'm aware of. I'm sure it's happened more. How many of you heard about the McDonald's coffee lawsuit that happened in the early 90s? So I remember hearing about late night talk shows were joking about this frivolous lawsuit. The woman spilled coffee on herself and she sued McDonald's. And so they made lots of jokes about it. And it was an example of the litigious nation that we live in now, where anything's wrong. And I stood in front of the church one day, and I said to the church, I used that example. Here's this woman, ooh, the coffee's hot. What'd you think hot coffee was going to be? And I said, look at this. Nobody takes responsibility. And afterwards, thankfully, there was someone in the church who said, Brian, you might want to look into that story a little bit more. There's more than you know. And they were very respectful when they gave me that feedback. And I'm like, really? Okay. So I looked into it. So here's the woman. Her name is Stella Liebeck. 1992, she stopped for a cup of coffee. Here are the facts. The facts, not the rumors, not the late night jokes. Typical coffee at the time was heated between 135 to 150 degrees, but McDonald's heated theirs 180 to 190 degrees because they said hot coffee tastes better. Now, the problem with 180 to 190 degrees is your skin will burn in 3 seconds. 3 seconds is all it takes. Matter of fact, part of what was so ridiculous about McDonald's claim when she spilled it on her lap is they said, well, you should have just pulled over from your car, jumped out, taken your pants off, and brushed it off. In 3 seconds for this 79-year-old woman. How many of you could have got the hot coffee off in 3 seconds in a car? She suffered third-degree burns on 16% of her body. She required skin grafts, 8 days in the hospital, and 2 years of recovery time. Not exactly what the late-night comedians were joking about. Then they discovered that 700 other people had been burned by this super hot coffee, and they were aware of it. And they did nothing. They didn't want to turn their coffee down because they thought it tasted better hot. She originally asked for $20,000 from McDonald's just to help with the expenses. Then she reduced it to $15,000 to help with the medical expenses, which wasn't going to cover the medical expenses. Skin grafts? Are you kidding me? 2 years of medical visits? McDonald's offered her $800. That's why she sued. That's when she sued. And when the jury, sitting there hearing all these facts, heard what McDonald's knew this was a problem, knew that other people were being hurt, would not meet industry standards, they awarded her $2.9 million in punitive damages against McDonald's. Now that's the headline that everybody ran with. How accurate was their joking? Man, that woman deserved $2.9 million. And McDonald's was a total jerk about the way they handled that. Right? Totally different story. I was so grateful to my friend for pulling me aside and said, Brian, you might want to look into that a little bit more. I was wrong. And I had to issue an apology because I had not acted with discernment. So here's what we do. 3 things. First, all of us, we accept that there are liars in this world, right? I don't think that's controversial. I think all of you get that, right? So we are not going to just trust people. Trust is earned. People earn our trust. And by the way, all the good people in your life will have no problem with that. The con artists, the liars, they hate it when you try and say, well, let's get to know each other and see if this is going to go somewhere. They just want you to believe them day one. Never, ever, ever trust someone who will not give you time to earn their trust. Never. I've got stories about that, but not for today. Second, start thinking gray. You hear something. Oh my goodness, Johnny Depp is a monster. Let's ban all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Hit pause and think gray. It may be true, it may not be true. I'm going to hold it in the middle. Brian may be stealing chocolate chip cookies from the church. He may not be. I'm going to hold it right in the middle. I'm going to think gray about it. And then you're going to do what you can to find out what the actual answer is. You're going to research online. You're not until you are forced to make the decision. Don't form an opinion. And that's what discernment looks like in America today. That's what discernment looks like in America. Let me have you all bow your heads as we finish up today. You know, the reality is that God has said that there are things in this world that are right and wrong. There are things. And the reality is, spiritually, what Jesus came to reveal is that all of us have stepped over the line with things that are wrong in the eyes of God. And every time we've hurt a human being, we've hurt God. And Jesus came on this amazing rescue mission. And he wants us to learn how to trust him with our very eternal souls. Our eternal souls. Because he loved us enough to give his life on a cross for all of us. And then he rose again 3 days later. The tomb could not hold him. He took his life back 3 days later, rose again to prove to all of us that he is God and that he can forgive anyone who comes to him. Now maybe spiritually you're not at a point where you're ready to put your trust in him, but that is what he wants for you to do. Spiritually, if that makes sense and you're ready, you can trust him today. And he will begin to work in your life to change you from the inside out. With your head bowed, your eyes closed, you can say something like this to him. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. There's certainly things I've done wrong in my life. But I believe in you. That you went to the cross for me. And today I am putting my trust in you. Forgive me and take over my life today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish up, if there are comments or questions you want to make, this is how you communicate with us. You have this little card in your program. Take it out. If maybe you asked Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment, let us know. If you have something you want us to pray about, here's the place where you can just write that down and then drop this in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back wall where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. We hope to see you again next week.